So what this video is we're going to go through the inspection list, we're going to talk about what each thing means, and we're going to show on our robot where it's legal. So to start out with, very first item, robot is presented at inspection with all mechanisms, including all components of each mechanism, configurations and decorations that will be used on the robot. We've hit our hardware freeze, so we're done building. So this is our robot as it will be during competition. Separately test the robot in all of its unique starting pre-matched set of configurations. The robot fits within the sizing tool without exerting undue force on the sizing tool sides and top. Okay, so our only starting configuration is this in here. So then, there's the sizing cube. We look at that a little bit. It fits nice and snug. There's a little bit of wiggle, which means I like to make sure there's a little bit of wiggle. It means we're not exerting pressure. And we're clear on the top too. Robot motion warning label is attached. So you look right here, we've got the robot servo motion label. Okay, then general robot design rules. I don't really have a great idea how to do this, so I'm just going to read them and say no. Robot does not contain any components that could damage the playing field. So they list examples of that higher up in the rules. Robot does not contain any materials that are hazardous. Robot poses no obvious risk of entanglement. There's no wires hanging out, there's no string. The only arm that comes out is this. There's nothing that's going to stab inside of other robots and entangle. No sharp edges or corners. So basically the way that our head ref for North Carolina says that you do this is you just kind of run your finger along corners and make sure that, well, I mean, obviously if you're bleeding, there's a problem. Make sure you're not like extremely poked either. And we're all good. So those are all good. Robot does not contain any animal-based liquid or gel materials. We're good here. We did check our adhesives. You don't necessarily have to, but we do because we want to make sure we're legal. Robot does not contain materials that would cause a delay of game. We don't. We don't try and ground the robot to the playing field. The only contact with the playing field is our wheels. We do not have any closed gas devices, no hydraulics, no vacuum. Team number. We've got one here. It is visible from at least the camera's, 18, 24 inches away, so it's visible from at least that far. It's definitely visible from more than that. And we have it on the second side as well. So that's two sides for the team numbers. Alliance markers are present. It's there. It meets the size requirements. It is removable. It's hard to remove because we're in a remote game, so we don't need to swap them out easily, but we could swap them out if we had to. And there's our second alliance marker. Energy used by the robot shall only come from approved sources. So we've got 2 bits of energy. We've got the battery, which you can't see, and then this actually has potential energy because it's squishing compliant with us. So those are both allowed sources of energy for a robot to have. Robot is not capable of locking its own components. We're not. That would be things like if you shot a grappling hook. That's illegal. Okay. All components on the robot are from allowable raw materials and commercial off-the-shelf products. This is true. We've mostly got Gobilda and Rev on here, but we also have some wood cut panels, 3D printed panels, and aluminum cut panels. And we've got some of this corrugated plastic stuff. All of that is allowed materials and commercial off-the-shelf parts. Power switch is installed securely. It's properly labeled. It is readily accessible. It's visible to competition personnel. It is a Rev power switch, which is one of the legal and allowed ones. That was a whole job. There. All batteries are securely attached to the robot. So we actually don't have a battery in here right now, but the battery fits very snugly in that holder. Exactly one battery pack Yep, we go right here. It plugs into here, which plugs into the control hub. So it is connected to the main power switch. So yeah, this is actually the main power switch, which is then plugged into the control hub. Where present, fuses must not be replaced. We haven't replaced any fuses. They have more rules there, but I'm not going to read them because that is exhausting. Allowed electronic devices are powered by ports. So yeah, we've got the rev power distribution block, which is plugged into the control hub, which then powers the expansion hub and our servo power module, and our rev blinket. So those are all off of the power ports. Rev expansion hub and or rev control hub. So the rev control hub is powered by the robot main battery and the rev expansion hub. Rev Spark mini motor controllers, we don't have any, but if we did, they'd have to be powered by the main battery. Allowed sensors may only receive power from the rev expansion hub or rev control hub. We only have one sensor on here, which is this distance sensor, and it is plugged directly into the expansion hub. Light sources, including LEDs, are not focused or direct in any way. So we've got these emissive LEDs, so they're not focused. And the one exception is with distance sensors, which we have one right there. So that's focus light, but that's allowed. Well, specifically the rev 2-meter distance sensor, which is what we have there. Video recording devices, we're not using any. Robot controller Android device, we're not using it. Exactly one robot controller, we're using the rev control hub model. So behind this expansion hub, there's a rev control hub, and then we have our one additional rev expansion hub allowed. The motor and servo controllers, we're using a control hub, an expansion hub, and a rev servo power module. We're not using anything else. Robot contains no more than 8 DC motors of the allowed models. So we've got 4 for our drivetrain train. Those are all GoBuilda 5202s. We've got a core hex motor here for our transfer. We've got another GoBuilda 5202 for our wobbly goal. And then we've got a Rev Ultraplanetary for our shooter. And so that's 8 total. And they are all allowed motors. Robot contains no more than 12 servos. We've got 2 driving this portion of the transfer, 1 driving this gecko wheel, 1 driving that gecko wheel, 1 closing this, and 1 launching rings out of our shooter. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 total. So that is within 12. Only allowed sensors, the only sensor we've got on here is the rev distance sensor, and that one is connected to the expansion hub. Power and motor wires, we didn't change anything, so those are all legal. Power, motor control, servo, and sensor wires, the correct size, again, we didn't change those wires. If electronics are grounded to the robot frame, they are. They're grounded using a rev grounding strap right there, which is the only allowed method. Approved electronic and electronic devices may be modified to make them more usable. They may not be modified internally or in a way that affects their safety. We've modified this camera, we drilled a hole in it to make it easier to mount. And we've modified the rev power distribution block. We swapped the standard backplate out for a 3D printed backplate. But that does not affect their safety or internals in any way. The optional wheel test, we're using standard GoBuilda mechanisms, so we're not going to damage wheel ties. Cool deal. So that's everything on the robot inspection checklist. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. And yeah, thank you.